Hello, this is Debbie, and this is Light Up Your Worth. And I am so excited to bring you my friend Ayanna today. This amazing goddess is here, and there is so much goodness that is going to come through with her wisdom. And I cannot wait for this conversation. It's going to be so yummy. So, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited that we're able to coordinate this and come and share all of the wisdom that is just, it's just coming through your whole aura. You know, as we tape this on Zoom, I have this like aura niche, like the great lights in the background. And it just seems so fitting for the energy. You know, when we connected, it was through Facebook, you know, on social platforms, and it's amazing how many people we meet, but there was just something special about you and this aura that you give off. And I just really want to, you know, have you had that experience when you are meeting with somebody and it's an aura, it's a feeling, it's a vibe that you get when you meet with somebody?
Yeah, I have.
And you just go, I want to know some more of that. And so I would love to hear about how we have this beautiful goddess in front of us and how she has become who you are right now at this moment.
How she has become. Never done with the whole becoming process, right? But it did start. I was listening to one of your episodes talking about chakras and crystals and how you had nobody to speak to for a really long time about it. So I'll say that the journey started with part of like the women couldn't speak stage, we couldn't wear midriffs. It was that sort of vibe. And I was part of this church and I kept getting this urge to meditate. Like I was in college at the time and I kept getting like, go meditate. So I ended up going to a Buddhist. And it's so funny because at the beginning of this conversation, you asked, have you ever, met somebody who you were just like, I want to know more? The first face that popped into my head was the priest at this Zen Buddhist center. Oh my God, her energy was like, just a breath of fresh air. She would walk around the meditation because we would sit there for an hour and she would, make sure our spines were straight. So she'd walk by and rub her finger down your spine and like she'd touch you and like, it'd be like, oh, you just want it to melt. And it was just something about her spirit. And I remember she used to wear this little skull bracelet. And I remember asking her, well, I don't remember specifically what she said, but just being curious about the skulls. And she explained to me that was about death and being comfortable with death. And so the journey started when I realized that there were so many different forms of spirituality outside of the religion I was taught when I grew up. And I knew it was more outside of that because my father died when I was 12. Throughout high school, I was grieving, I was doing the whole thing. And he came to me in a dream, 9th or 10th grade, and I got to watch him transition. Now, my father was not Christian at all, not even a little bit. And, even at church I was in, they tried to tell me that he was in hell and everything like that. And what pushed me away from it was me remembering this dream. Like, I watched this man transition. He's not in hell. He's at peace. I knew he was at peace. I had watched him move into peace. And I knew that even though he wasn't Christian. So I was already carrying the dream and stuff with me through high school. And then I'm at this Zen Buddhist center and just realizing that God, source, we're not going to say the universe, because the universe is a small aspect of the entirety of source, right? But when you begin to realize that there's so much out there, and then that's, of course, I started stumbling into Kemetic teachings and the goddesses, and I've allowed myself to be open to it now because I went to the Zen Center, and I knew that woman was, even though the way she touched me, I knew to explore so many other things, and that's what and even Kemetic love, action, goddess energy. I hang out now with feminine money and nervous system regulation, and how all of that's like interacts with each other. And yeah, it all is spirit at the end of the day, and it still is deeply spirit. The time and space up to how spirit is a part of everything, including their business. A lot of people think that the business is something separate from spirit, and it's not in my world. In some people's world, but if you're here working with me, the two are connected.
I completely agree. I think that as we are stepping into a business, or you've been in a business, it's like separating your body from your mind or your soul, right? Like your business is a representation of you.
I mean, powerful example. Yes.
Yeah, I love that you're able to connect people and see that. I know what I've experienced as a solopreneur, entrepreneur, is that the first time you step out into it, is that it brings up all kinds of buried fears, subconscious beliefs. I mean, what have you seen? What have you seen as women, especially as women, right? We carry so much generational stuff with us. What have you seen when people step out, when women are stepping into their purpose as you work with them?
That's a good one. The main thing that I find myself having to remind people, especially beginners, the people who are just now stepping into this, is that this is the normal lifestyle. You know, we are in this world. Even right now, I've gotten myself a little condo near a beach, and I'm getting up, I'm going outside in the morning, and it's still literally where the cars during the daytime are gone because they got to go to work. And I thought it would be different at the beach, and it's not. They just bought their home on the beach, but they still got to go back and forth to work. My point here is I'll see people start their business, not be consistent in it, or start their business and come up against, they're watching everybody else go work hard. You start to feel lazy. You start to feel like, who am I to enjoy this sort of lifestyle when everybody else around me is doing A, B, C, and D? And even when it comes to content creation, everything like that, learning how to be willing to stand out, learning how to be willing to be the person who is doing things differently, who is thinking differently, because you're going to have all the people who are thinking the same in your ear. Funny because my membership, the whole on sales page, first sentence goes something like that, forget about being realistic. What are your true, deepest desires, right? And that's the work through the mindset of just expanding your mindset to be able to carry your desires, right? So you have this desire to have a flourishing business, etc. A lot of times that takes expanding your capacity to believe in that, right? So again, oftentimes you're going to be different.
Expanding your capacity to believe.
Yes.
that's good. Expanding your capacity to believe. I'm going to say it again for everybody listening. Expanding your capacity to believe. Oh, to believe in themselves. They're all worthy. You know, it's interesting that you hit upon the point that, and I think in one of my recent chats with Van, was that we also talked about that worthiness, you know, that, and we talked about that belief about it doesn't, you know, the rush, but the belief of it has to be hard.
A tough one to deprogram for sure.
Yeah. Have you seen where so many people who are so worthy, you can see their worthiness, where they're having to, they think it needs to be so hard.
Yeah, and again, this is the importance of like understanding paradigms and beliefs, because you can believe you're worthy, but if you have the paradigm that the only way things work is if you work hard, then you're literally going to create that reality for yourself. Recently, I've been really diving deeply into the truth that whatever paradigm you choose is the paradigm you're going to experience, right? So, and there is no right or wrong, yes or no. I say this all the time. Your inner Christ just says yes to whatever you believe, whatever you say. Your paradigm is just, yes, okay, that's the reality we're working with. Let's build it. She said so, because it loves you so much, right? So it's your job to choose which paradigm actually matches your desires. And a lot of times we think that just because a paradigm is prevalent, just because a lot of people believe it, that it's true. And that's not necessarily the case. My personal belief is that there is no true paradigm. It's just all these different paradigms that people have chosen. I don't know if you've ever studied quantum physics and heard of this double-slit experiment, right? But before we put our consciousness on the things, there is an infinite number of possibilities, an infinite number of paradigms available. And until we put our limited consciousness on that and impose our limited paradigm, suddenly we've limited reality into certain, individual outcomes. But the reality is that before we introduce our consciousness, our limitations, and all of that, that there's infinite possibilities available. So when you talk about working hard and people embodying that paradigm, I just want to offer another option, because you can keep living that paradigm. That's fine. It can work for you. There are people who are making billions of dollars working hard because that's what they believe. But there are also people who are making billions of dollars not working hard because that's what they believe. And so I just want to, offer the people who are listening just like another option. Like you don't have to like give into that. You can choose another reality for yourself.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. There's two things that you touched on that I want to drill down into a little bit. So you had referenced an experiment, and I don't know if you want to elaborate on that for people. There's some who are listening who are like, what, the science? What, there's science behind what we've been talking about, which we both know, but I don't know if you'd like to elaborate on that. And then I also wanted to talk through, but I'll pause there. I'm gonna make a note to myself because I also want to talk to paradigm shifts.
Yeah. So we'll start. Quantum physics double-slit experiment. They have a wall with two slits in it. And through the slits, they send protons. Now, when there is no, what's the word I'm looking for? No presence watching the protons go through and they land everywhere. There's like this longer wave. So there is no limitation. But when they put like a watcher or a machine or anything there, when the protons go through, they land in a very specific pattern in very specific spots on the other side of this wall. So without the watcher, it can be anywhere. With the watcher, it's very specific places it can be. So what this is pointing towards is the fact that before we put our consciousness, the watcher there, things can go any way. And then once we put that watcher there, that's when it becomes the limit.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love how you explained it, because I have, the book I'm rereading is, Dr. Joe Dispenza right now. I'm becoming supernatural. And I just reread what you were talking about, like about a week ago. And so I was like, oh my goodness, like you just explained what he's talking about, like in chapter 3, I think it is. And so people are looking for a reference to go back. It's either in chapter 2 or chapter 3, where he talks exactly about that watcher, about the conscious and how they're able to connect it and the science behind it. So thank you. I love your explanation of it. I think it's, we have to understand it. I think it's sometimes connected with our logical brain, right? Our left and right brain can connect. And then we're able to go, okay, let me trust it. Let my intuition trust it. But I need to hear some of the logical stuff. I think as people are, depending on where they are in the spectrum of using their left and their right brain, or their feminine and masculine, and how they can switch onto this pentium, I think understanding the science, just even to know that there is actual science literature, and there's actually quite a bit of it, is it helps us relax more into it on our journeys. For a big group of people. Absolutely. And then there's those that go, okay, I just know that what they're saying is true. And, depends on where they are.
And that's not me.
Yeah. So you know the science.
I'm the person who, I need the science. And honestly, even with the science, it took me a while to really, I kept having to test it, and I test God out, test source out, test out the reality that my paradigms create my reality. But over the last 2.5 years, it is looking to be so. Just based on the experiences.
So I want to dig into a little bit about paradigms. So how would you define a paradigm? If somebody, it's like, well, you hear the word, but what does the word mean to you, paradigm? Let me talk about paradigm shifts.
For me, the word paradigm is the way you look at the world in relation to a particular area, or, you can have a paradigm around religion, a paradigm around the way relationships work, a paradigm around the way you get to make money. So a way of thinking, a way of believing about the world, about how things works. That's what a paradigm is for me.
I love that explanation. When in my corporate world, when I do change for people, one of the ideas that we bring in is paradigms, that as we walk through doing like performance improvement, changing processes, is that when we hit a paradigm, we don't even know that we've hit a paradigm a lot of times. We believe that everybody thinks the same way, right? Like here's a simple one that just came to my mind. Is, I grew up in the US, I grew up in California, I grew up in the Bay Area, I grew up in East San Jose. Okay. So shout out to all my East Side peeps. Okay. So working class neighborhood is the neighborhood I grew up in. And so I grew up with multicultures, right? And so growing up, played sports. We would have potlucks, learn how to use chopsticks. Okay, this is a very simple paradigm.
Amazing.
I learned how to use chopsticks. So fast forward in my mid 30s, early 40s, I started doing a lot of travel in Asia. And I remember eating lunch in the cafeteria. I think it was Singapore. And we're just eating, and we're all using our chopsticks, and they all stopped, and they're like, how did you know how to use the chopstick? And I'm like, because everybody uses them where I live. It's just a normal, it's not abnormal to use a chopstick, right? Or the spoon versus the fork. And it was this really, I realized that there was these paradigms that I didn't even realize that they were hitting and I was hitting. I just assumed, like, they automatically brought me a fork the first time we ate together. They just, she's going to need a fork. And I'm like, I don't need a fork. But we hit their paradigm, assuming that I wouldn't know how to do something, or the resistance, right? If somebody's resistant to, I don't need to use the chopsticks. I don't need to use the spoon. I want my fork. We're hitting against really basic paradigms, whether we put them on ourselves or on somebody else. And we don't even know. We don't even know that we're doing that. And so how have you seen somebody hit a paradigm and it looks like resistance, right? A lot of times it can look like resistance, but what have you seen with paradigms when you know that somebody is hitting a paradigm, and how you work with people? Like, how would somebody identify for themselves? How would somebody identify for themselves if they've hit a paradigm? That's actually a paradigm that they're hitting.
There's so many different ways, but right now, what's coming up is for me to talk about NLP, because I have a little small certification in it, right? And what you want to begin to do is pay attention to the language. You start using words like everybody, nobody, always, never. These sort of words point towards generalizations and ideas that most times are not completely accurate. So it can be as simple as just noticing these words and these small little things in your language that are pointing towards like overgeneralizations that you have about people in the world and etc.
That's a really good perspective on listening to ourselves. Listening to ourselves. Listening to what words come out, the impact of our words, how they can really transform our lives. So if I've looked at the paradigm that I have to work hard for all this to come together so that I can live on the beach, do my work. I don't have to be out there in that race, because I agree with you that this shift into more people wanting to be out on their own has been it's a big shift that's really awakening a lot of people. Have you seen this in the work that you're doing?
I see it, but then I also don't. Let me explain. So I see a lot of people who want to do it. I don't see a lot of people committed to doing it. And those are two different things for me. Like, you can want something, but are you committed? This or nothing else? For me, it's this or nothing else. We're going to do whatever it takes, point blank, period. For a lot of people, it's like, oh, that would be nice. That's two different energies.
Yeah. So what's the energy about a commitment? What if somebody thinks, well, I think I'm committed? What is that energy? How do you see the differences?
There is no other option with the commitment. It's devotion. There is no plan B. There is this and this only. And we know this works. We're not planning for we're planning for this to work. Yeah, it's tunnel vision focus. It's like it's tunnel vision. Tunnel vision is a good word for me. Yeah, tunnel vision.
Yeah, when you go back and you read biographies of some of the people who have created amazing things out in the world, right? Especially I'm drawn to the people at the early parts of the century, when a lot of the more like industrial engineer types of folks were creating all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, and they would work on something, they would work on it, they would work on it.
Years breaking down the problem, years trying to figure out how to get light to years. That's called commitment. Yes, that's the energy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they just pretty much did whatever it took. Last year I watched this movie, and I'm sorry, I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but she was in like a state and she created hair products.
Okay.
And she was determined, right? Like she was a woman, she had no education, and she created products for Black women's hair, right? And at that time, there were no Black women running businesses. And she was determined to get this product out, right? Like she went and she created it, and then she was helping somebody. Then she went and created her own formula. And then she went like door to door, and I can't think of her name. But it was a really well done movie. And the actress, and I can't think of the actress's name. I sound like I'm half describing this, but it was so powerful because her commitment was, this is it, right? Like she's in her kitchen mixing up this formula of stuff for hair products, going to all these women who can't afford to go to these fancy places. And so she ends up starting this and having all these women come into her house, create this formula, and then she ended up being one of the most successful women of that time frame from these hair products and that commitment. So it hadn't been done before. Well, she was going to change that.
So it hadn't been done before.
Yeah.
She's going to change that. And it's so funny you mentioned that, because a lot of the work go ahead. I was just going to say, you're talking about this Black woman in the hair company. I'm not sure if we're talking about the same woman, because I don't know the woman who I'm thinking about right now, but like the first Black millionaire happened in like, I want to say late 1900s. The point is, it was at least 50 years ago, 50 to 100 years ago. And so again, a lot of people are carrying around the paradigm that Black women can't succeed in this world. And even me recently, the more I move about and I look, and I'm like, I don't want that paradigm anymore. Y'all can have that one. Because I'm just seeing too much proof that doesn't have to be true. Like, I mean, and a lot of people are living that reality. They're living that paradigm. And we're not going to say it's not real, but it's not the paradigm. It's not the only paradigm available. And like we were talking about with quantum physics and everything, if we get to choose which world we're going to participate in, let's really be wise about how we go about doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's, I think if I should have Googled it before. Well, I didn't know we were going to touch on the paradigm shifts that it takes to actually create the life. And this all started, your whole journey started with meditation. And so I'm curious to know now, this far in your journey, I'm going to make an assumption that you meditate.
Not a whole lot, not as often as I should.
Oh, that's so interesting, because now tell me more. How do you then, as you continually keep yourself in this space, choose your paradigms, then how do you hold that space for yourself?
I still have a lot of tools, no doubt, and I still breathe often. Deep breaths are necessary. But since I'm not at the Zoom Buddhist Center, it's not like 60-minute sessions, and we're not doing all of that right now. But some of my favorite tools include EFT. I was just doing EFT in the shower yesterday. If I notice myself having a limiting belief, I'm like, even though I am thinking such and such and such and so, I choose to believe such and such and such and so. Even though such and so is going, I literally did this in the shower just yesterday. I'll do it whenever. That's one of my favorite go-to tools because it's using these Chinese acupuncture points, right? It's just so easy. Another thing is I'll wake up or whatever time of day, it doesn't even have to just be in the morning, but yoga. But I don't do real yoga. Look, I'm lazy. I don't want to lie to nobody. Okay. I'll lay my sheet out on the floor in the morning, and I have a few like 5 to 10 yoga poses that I remember in my head. And I'll spend 5 to 10 minutes stretching out the tension in my body. So it's yoga, it's EFT, and it's nervous system regulation. And what I mean by that, because I know a lot of people are using that particular term right now, what I mean when I say that is this deep awareness of your emotions as bodily sensations, without getting caught up in the narrative that is associated with them, and then learning how to allow the feeling that's in your body somewhere space to breathe and move and transmute itself without becoming attached to, again, the narrative that comes up as a result. So, we're having feelings of anxiety in our chest or whatever. For a long time, for me, that equal, okay, let me go into my anxious thinking. Oh no, I'm worried. The practice I've been doing lately is let's just stay with the anxiety. Oh, my heart is beating fast. Let's just stay there. Instead of running away from the emotion into my mind, let's just stay with the emotion and find a level of safety inside of our bodies. No matter whether the emotion is good or bad, we still need to feel safe with our bodies. And so a lot of the work is learning how to feel safe with your body in all the different ways that it fluctuates. And again, that's a practice that for most of us we don't just wake up out of bed, because a lot of us grew up with sort of like unhealthy ways of learning how to deal with our emotions. And so retraining ourselves to be with our emotional body, and that's what I mean by feminine money, is when I'm talking and I'm working with clients, I'm inside your body. We're dealing with the feminine principle of, like, again, this nervous system regulation and learning how to be and not leaving and coming back and, all of that. So those are a few of the main tools that I use. Yeah.
Oh, I'm just going to sink into that. The nervous system regulation and sitting and allowing when those emotions come up. That's powerful.
It is. It absolutely is. It's some of the most powerful, potent work, honestly.
I think most of us are raised to believe, in fact, I think I have a little magnet of just pull your big girl pants up and deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just put those two bits together. I think I kind of like it, because taken in the wrong way, it could mean that you're suppressing whatever that feeling is that's causing you to feel angst or anxiety. I think anxiety is pretty common much more common for us as we work through things. Allowing the feelings.
Allowing the feelings. Absolutely.
Just allowing. So, and how do, women, as we go to support each other, how would you suggest if, say, you were having these emotions come up and we just happen to be together? We're out doing something, maybe we're talking on the phone, and these feelings I think a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with those coming up, and so we don't want to share. But say you have a friend you can share it with, or you have a coach that you can share it with. How can, if we were just friends, how can we support each other with that moment? Because we try to don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. Right.
Right. And you still do that part later, but that's not the first thing you do, for sure.
because it's
Okay, so
powerful.
for me, some of the easiest, most important work requires for us to do nothing, but just to hold space for people. Like I said, emotions are smart themselves. They know how to move through your body and allow themselves to be felt and then release themselves. They don't want to hang around with you all day either, but they just need time to move. And so I find a lot of times with friends or clients, especially if you don't have like a lot of training or experience or anything like that, some of the most important, potent work you can do for people is just listen and say, yeah, you know, that's kind of sucks. You're right. You shouldn't have to go through that. Absolutely. Like helping people learn how to hold space for the fullness of their emotions instead of teaching people that certain emotions are not okay and let's move past this already into something better. You're going to be fine. Now, I don't believe in staying in anything for a long time. So after we felt the feelings, I'm still going to tell you everything is going to be okay because you are supported by the universal source, right? And everything is working out for your well-being. But before we go there, we have to honor the body and the experiences that it has had that is making it create these sensations inside of you. So we can be a fully integrated being instead of a being whose mind is over here and whose body is over here and whose emotions can everything just be like one whole thing.
Allowing the fullness. Yeah, they don't want to hang out with you.
They don't.
No, they don't want to hang out. Do you find then? Because I think like 2 weeks ago, I was feeling something about something had still been processing for a couple months, but it came on super intensely, right? Like all of a sudden, I am just like in this like super ugly cry, right? Like I am feeling this like feeling it was a betrayal and of a friend, and I was feeling this betrayal so intensely, and it hadn't just happened, right? This was something that had happened months before, and I had started to process it. I thought I had processed it, and all of a sudden it came on me. And for about an hour, you wouldn't, if you had called me, you know, if you had called, I probably would have, maybe I might have picked up the phone, right? And tried to suck it back in. And I think towards the end of it, somebody had to ask me, so how's your day going? And it's like, yeah, I'm processing something. And I left it at that, right? Because I didn't want somebody to actually make me feel better at that moment. And, you know, I was able to release it all. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Next.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't need, that's what your definition of a friendship was. Yeah, it's a good thing that it's past.
And it might come back a little later asking for another day of processing. Like, give her another day if she need another day, you know? Yeah, but if you give her that day, you really like, all right, let's go deep. Let's really get the tears from deep inside it. Like, it'll be gone the next day. You'll be good to go if you really allow yourself that space to move through it. And then you have the right tools to, again, move the energy. So I wouldn't suggest to anybody, if you're not familiar with like mindset and paradigms and all these different things, to go dive too deeply into anything, especially not the narrative behind it. But there's just such freedom in not having to run away from the things.
Yeah. You know, what I did was that once I was able to like kind of like towards the end of the ugly cry was that that was so intense for those moments, right? It was so intense. I could just feel this raw pain. And then I was able to like ground myself down, allow it. And then I had to ask myself, what belief did I just uncover? What belief did this behavior demonstrate to me? What belief, what paradigm am I hitting?
And that's usually what they're there to guide you towards.
And what belief now do I know that I didn't even realize I had? And I was like, hallelujah. Let's get that BS out of here, right? Belief system is BS. Let's get that belief system out.
Yes.
Be done.
That's the word. Oh my God. That's literally the work. That's literally the work. And if you do that enough, your life will start to change around you. Like, yeah, I know a lot about business, and we're not going to say I don't have like masculine aspects. Like I'm very good with copy, very good with branding and all of that. But at the end of the day, I always attract a client right after I do some work like this. So I'll discover a memory and I'll do some work around it, or I'll discover thought or a belief and I'll do some work around it. And then I'll wake up the next morning and suddenly a client's like, oh, I've been watching you for a year. How can I work? You know what I'm saying? So at least I have found for me, it makes sense because we're talking about, the life. The spiritual, when we think about the heart being 100 times more powerful than the brain, and the brain being all of that structure and the masculine and all of that, which is powerful, yes, but this heart space is 100 times more magnetic than anything else. So when you do the work and you start clearing out that heart space and loosening up some of the energy in that heart space, I find, the same thing happens with my clients as well. We'll do some work and then suddenly they're waking up to $1,000, $2,000 in their bank account because we moved some energy with their grandmama or something like that. And then they wake up to some new money. But it's because the heart is the most magnetic. So when we do that work, it's so potent. It's just so potent. And you feel better. Like sometimes just the idea of feeling lighter is worth the money just to feel better.
Right? Oh, I used to just feel all those feels, but I didn't get to that point, that connector. And so I can imagine how powerful it is when people are working with you. Well, you hold the space for them to feel the feels. And the coaching, the energy, the goddess part of yourself about identifying the patterns.
Yeah.
The behaviors that are going to lead you to the belief, right? Getting out of the freaking story. And we love to talk about the stories, don't we? We're going to post about it on social media. Mary and I talked about this recently too, right? Like, she was talking about the 1,000 butterfly kisses that day and then a bee stinged you. What are we talking about? The bee sting. What about
We're talking about the bee
butterfly? Like, let's bring that in, right? Let's bring in that love that transforms and not just feeling. I mean, feeling the feelings is a good step. And for those who are struggling, who are numbing, right, with whatever they're numbing with, or they're stuck. I think we get stuck. But that next step. Step is so powerful, especially I think with where we're going from 3D to 5D. Like it's all about that heart. It's all about that heart energy that you're talking about and clearing out that stuff with your grandmama that's in there that just doesn't serve anybody anymore. Maybe it did back then, right? Maybe it's what kept grandmama alive, right? Kept her safe. A certain behavior or a certain pattern. But now it's got to go.
It's got to go. It's no longer serving you. It's no longer serving your expansive state. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, I love this. I think we've had all the listeners a little nugget there about when they're feeling the feels to ask themselves to take a look. Can they help with their own paradigms? What belief is it? But sometimes we can't see that. So we need to work with people who can help us see that and then exponentially grow and get
Yes.
past those blocks.
Yes.
So if somebody is listening now and they're like, I want some of that goddess energy. This is the first time I've ever heard of a paradigm shift. How can they reach you?
How can they reach me? Well, I'm on Facebook. I'm on the Instagram. Ayanna Nefertaari. So AYANNANEFERTAARI. Ayanna means beautiful flower, and Nefertari means beautiful princess. So I'm kind of in love. But the website is spiritualgoddessmagic.com, and right now I have a membership called Rich and Aligned. And it's called Rich and Aligned because you get to have the money and you get to feel good and aligned at the same time. Is so important. So for the people who are just, looking for a community of support to hold them as they are moving this energy, holding this energy, and needing a community to guide them in pinpointing and locating the patterns and paradigms and beliefs that has them stuck in certain sort of feelings, I'm going to highly suggest the membership as a starting point, right? Just because you get that one-on-one group support, you also get access to digital material. And even a bit earlier, I was going to say there is beauty in digital courses and digital material. I have a couple of coaches, one in particular, who I go back to her material over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, because when we're talking about creating new paradigms, like how can we create a new paradigm with our old paradigm? You know what I mean? Like how can we change our thinking with our own thinking? We need somebody outside of us to be like, yeah, no, there's another way to think about this too. And so in Rich and Aligned, you get access to like 36 hours every 4 days of digital material just to support you as you are creating new paradigms and ways of being and stepping and expanding into new ways of being. So yeah, that's where I would suggest you start. Of course, I do one-on-one and masterminds, but I think that's the starting spot.
Oh, that is wonderful. Yeah, because when you talk about, I always think of like a canyon. You have a belief here, and then you have to get to the other side of the canyon, like Twin Falls, Idaho. It's like the visual I get. It's a huge
Okay.
canyon, right? So people can Google the Twin Falls, they'll see like it's huge, big Grand Canyon. And but when you're in that bridge between the beliefs, your current paradigm, and switching over to where it actually feels like that is just now who you are, you're in this kind of vulnerable space of is this real? Or if you hit a bit of a road bump.
Been there.
Oh, maybe that's not my maybe not. And it's so easy to kind of like take 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
True. It's so easy.
So a community to be able to support you, to say, no, that's all it is. It's just a pause. You're on the right path. You're looking at this, because I think especially as we have women, the struggles that women have been through. You have any individual struggles that anybody has about their neighborhood, their family origins, right? Like there could be first generation anything, and they're gonna come with all of those belief systems, their family, how they were raised in the family. Maybe they weren't raised by 2 parents; they were raised by a single mom or a single dad or grandparents. I mean, there is so much. Communities, your neighborhood, where you went to school. Maybe you didn't get to go to school past high school, right? And there's so many influences of how we have all these paradigms. And I think women shining their light, making that commitment to themselves requires a commitment to your own growth.
Absolutely.
It sounds like that's your communities for people who are committed. And you want to keep going, and so you need that support. So I highly recommend that people reach out, especially if they're looking to really, you know, wouldn't you like to wake up and have an extra $1,000 and $2,000 from doing the work with your grandma? Right? Like,
Right?
oh, I just cleared something out and look what just happened.
I mean, but true, absolutely.
And don't we all have grandmamas, right? Or great grandmas and stuff that we've inherited. We don't even know, right? Like those generations ago, you know, they didn't even have a freaking washing machine. Can you imagine? If you just looked at paradigms with how our lives live, like they definitely didn't have internet, right? They didn't have microwaves were created in the 70s.
So they're living in a completely different world, paradigm. And if you're not careful, they'll limit you right back to 1920. And we ain't in 1920 anymore. So it's important for you to remember, like you say, to have that support, to stay in a state of expansion.
Yeah, I think, you know, I never really had thought about comparing that. Like if you look at just our technology, or how different our lives are, right? Like I didn't grow up with social media. You know, I'm in my mid-50s. I didn't grow up with everything I did being on social media. Now you can have somebody who was, you know, 20 years old and that's all they've known. All they know is selfies. Do people used to go to get their picture taken, or did they, you know, like
we
don't
do
know
that
that
anymore.
you can actually take pictures other than this round, right? Like we used to see our whole bodies in our pictures, every picture.
That's so true. That's so true.
You know, so there's so many paradigms that we just don't even are aware of, just from simply how we live our life, how different it was, even, you know, growing up 20 years before. So thank you so much. So much. And Lily,
it's been a
Lily, sorry, but she's like, supporting us in this podcast energy.
Hey, boo.
I know. So I am so honored that you were here and shared so many, you know, bits of wisdom with, you know, how we can take a look at our own paradigms and make these big shifts into where we're going to lead ourselves as women, lead our own businesses, making that commitments to ourselves, and all of the tools that you shared with the listeners. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.